Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Sonic Chronicle. My name is Owen, and today I've got something real special. Today we have another Casually in Conversation episode, but today I am speaking to the wonderfully talented John Steele. Those of you who have been around for a little while may recognize the name as someone whose music came up in my release radar review a while back. John commented on that episode and has been very complimentary on the format that I do in terms of the release radar review, and has been very supportive of the Casually in Conversation interviews that I've done so far as well, becoming fans certainly of Nolene and of Big Yellow Jacket as well. John is very, very interesting in terms of his musical history as well. He and I spoke for, I think it was nearly an hour and a half, maybe longer than an hour and a half, when we had this conversation. So this is trimmed down substantially from that conversation. He's a very interesting man, has so much to offer in terms of insight, in particular the idea of listening to and taking advice from the old fogies that you might see knocking around or that you might be playing some gigs with. He's super interesting. He's got a lot to offer. If you like this series, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave comments underneath. Comments help out greatly in terms of the algorithm. They should tell YouTube that you're interested in this and that other people might be interested in it too, so it really drives that engagement overall. Without further ado, thank you all very much for taking some time here to watch this video, and I hope you really enjoy the conversation that I had with John. John, thank you so much for taking some time out of your evening to stop by and have a chat with me.
My pleasure.
It's nice to kind of chat to someone who, you know, I was reviewing and was very kind, I suppose, to share like the video on like your socials and stuff like that. So you were on my radar for quite a while. So it was nice to see you pop up on the release radar there on Spotify as well. Which
delighted I did actually. That was a surprise.
It's no mean feat, right? Because that algorithmic stuff on Spotify is such a pain to try and get on your side, you know? Like the idea of trying to like get yourself into like different playlists and stuff like that. But then again, I suppose it might just be that, you know, it saw me listen to your stuff before. So it was like, you've listened to this lad before, he's got a new single out. Maybe you like this, have a listen to that, you know? Yeah. But anyway, John Steele, Limerick musician in a number of bands. Flag Listeners, Fall Dogs, Rocket Surgeons. Is that right?
Rocket Surgeons is the new band. Yeah, it's basically the two albums that I have out were recorded during lockdown, so I kind of played everything on them, pretty much. So I just, you know, I have a really good band around me. It's pretty much the Fall Dogs band, right. But without one member, Ross Brennan, he's busy on another project. So, so I just wanted to be in a band again, you know. So the drummer Ian McNamara came up with this name, the Rocket Surgeon. So I thought, we'll go with that.
It's a nice name. It's a nice name.
Yeah. Especially because both of us have kind of come up against these unbelievable conspiracy theorists online. You know, we've had a bit of fun with them.
So. Oh, lovely. Yeah. That's, I suppose, something that, you know, is a theme that you kind of saw, I suppose, on All My Days in some places, right? That, this was the idea of like talking about conspiracy theories and talking about, in particular on the opening track, right? You know, what's it called?
Not as advertised.
Not as advertised, right? But, you know, it's clearly about Trump, right? And about him spouting his rubbish and, you know, people buying into it and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
He's filling up with drugs and Jesus. He's filling up with freedom fries. There's children crying, please release us. He's risking all his people's lives. I want my money back. I never realized. I want my money back. It's not as advertised. Here he comes. He's a man about town.
Which is kind of an interesting opener, right? It's a bold opener in some ways, right, to the record, right? To kind of talk about I suppose it kind of puts down a marker as to what people can kind of expect about the record in some
Yeah.
capacity, you know. Because I do think that there are some themes on there, like you know, I've done a number of interviews with a number of people already at this point, but I've kind of listened to all their back catalogue, and you're no exception, right? I've listened to all the singles and the albums a few times, like leading up to this, to kind of get a good sense as to the albums in general. But with All My Days in particular, in some places there's elements that explore, I suppose, an idea of powerlessness or kind of a lack of control, like watching others being taken in by this kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Like those conspiracy theories, Trump talking his rubbish, from like not as advertised as we talked about, and even down to the titles of tracks, like A World Without Sound, right? That like you can talk all you want into a void and no one will hear you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Big pandemic themes, right?
Yeah, like I suppose, I think you can pinpoint the exact moment, like as they say, we're living in a post-truth world. So all you have to do is say something that suits somebody's narrative, and whether you're, it doesn't matter what you say. I mean, Trump was right. He said I could just walk down Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody, and people will still vote for me. And he's right. And I think it's when Kellyanne Conway came out with that line, alternative facts, that just signaled the end of rationality online. And I'm very open to having my mind changed, and I have in a few topics, and I'm not going to get into anything major here, but
sure,
it's the fact that the conspiracy theorist wants to believe their narrative at all costs, even when presented with unassailable facts. I mean, like there's also the thing where they will block you. If you've touched a nerve and you said, like there's one guy, I couldn't believe it. He's a flat earther, and I couldn't believe I had uncovered one of these people. But he said that there was an experiment where somebody brought it. He first of all said that water can't bend, and obviously he's never drank a cup of tea, or so he said that there was an experiment where a guy brought a spirit level on a plane with him, and it wasn't like if they were constantly following the horizon, then it should, which is total bullshit. But I just said to him, well, if water doesn't bend, why was there a bubble in the spirit level? And he just immediately blocked me. And that's a kind of a running theme, and I suppose like one, and you're right, like there's a few like that on that album, like the main one being, and I'm very proud of the song, I Never Asked You to Follow.
Yes.
It's like people kind of attack you for saying something on your own timeline, and my answer to them, like I've occasionally put up long posts because I really don't care about social media, and I don't care about how I'm perceived on it to a certain extent, as long as I'm telling the truth.
Sure.
And as long as it's some way rational, I think it's okay. But there's some people that have taken offense to rationality, and my answer to them is I've never asked you to follow, and I never asked you to read this. And there is on your right a scroll bar where you can just go scoot right on past it.
Absolutely.
So yeah, there are themes like that on it.
Yeah. One thing that I did notice though is that the title track, All My Days, is nothing like anything like that at all, right?
Yeah, it's about my dad. Yeah,
I was going to say, it's a beautiful track, right?
Thank you.
It's a beautiful, I suppose, dedication to your father, right? Like talking about like the things like, there's still more shite to talk, and the reference to Tony Bennett, because again, doing my homework, I looked up like a number of interviews that you'd done with like the leader in the Post, right, when you were releasing Naturally Nocturnal, and talking about your father being a big influence, not because he was a particularly outgoing musician himself, I suppose, in some ways, but just from him knocking around the house and singing little bits and introducing it to artists like Tony Bennett.
If these are my to me. My essence is right here. And when Tony Bennett sings to me, I swear I feel you near. I fully understand how I am just half the man. All my days.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he was a sax player, but sadly, I never got to hear him play because it was they were kind of fighting for every kind of penny they could get at that time when before I came along. So the saxophone had to be sold, I think. So,
Gotcha.
but I bought him one shortly before he died, and unfortunately, it wasn't working. I've just recently got it repaired, so I'm teaching myself that. But
Oh, lovely.
so I never got to hear him play. But he did have a keyboard in the house, so he was well able to read and write music. So he was playing that quite often, and he was really good. But it's his voice. He had a brilliant timbre to his voice, and it was really that kind of Tony Bennett, Frank Sinatra, more Tony Bennett than Frank Sinatra, I think. And I just fell in love with Tony Bennett, and I still listen to his music. Obviously, my father saw where I was going. When I was younger, it was kind of metal that I was into. So he introduced me to Jimi Hendrix, and he introduced me to the Beatles and to Rory Gallagher.
Nice.
To try, like, he never said it, but I think it was to try and kind of streamline my music education, because I was kind of all over the place. So when I took an interest in guitar, he started pointing me in the direction of George Harrison and lots of other guitar players as well. But he loved Rory Gallagher, and I don't think he was particularly fond of Hendrix, but he recognised the genius that was there.
Sure.
So he pointed me in that direction as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Like, not being, I suppose, necessarily too gone on Hendrix, but loving Gallagher. I think that they're both very similar in a lot of ways, but I suppose the feel of Hendrix is very different to Gallagher in a lot of ways. Gallagher has an intensity about him, I suppose,
He does,
that
But,
Hendrix doesn't necessarily have in some ways.
Yeah, I think it's like my father pointed out something to me. That like a lot of the live videos of Hendrix in particular, it sounded like he was out of tune a lot. In a live setting, which he probably was, because he gave that guitar some punishment. But my father said it sounds to me like the bass is slightly out, and that kind of made a lot more sense to me. But it's also the way it was recorded. So I suppose you didn't get that. Like, Gallagher came along slightly. I know they were kind of around the same time, but when he did the Cork Opera House gig, like, the recording technology for live shows was a bit better. I think that's, like, Gallagher was probably a lot more technical, but Hendrix was just so inventive. He was a game changer.
I suppose the other thing about Hendrix is that part of his I suppose genius, as you mentioned, like, kind of comes from watching live videos of him playing live, is how he commands his band, right, over the course of playing, right, and just little nods, little things of, like, I'm going to do this, going to follow me on this, we're going to do that, and then going, like, okay, cool, Grant, we'll keep doing this, you do your thing, let us know when you're done, right, and it's wonderful to watch that kind of thing.
Oh, it's brilliant. Yeah, it's great. He's a real education, but it's also, the use of effects. I mean, the limited effects that he had. I know it's something that Stevie Ray Vaughan did. You have a half-cocked wah-wah pedal, that's giving you that different kind of tone, as well as being tuned down a half step. They're semi-toned down. Particularly Stevie Ray Vaughan, you can't really get his sound, and I don't try to get anybody's sound. I gave up on that a long time ago. Because why would you want to sound like anyone else? But in terms of guitar playing, like, Stevie Ray Vaughan was just inspirational. he definitely honed that tone, you know, and he got a lot of it from Hendrix, but he took it further. And I think, you know, it's the Tube Screamer, obviously the GS9.
Yeah.
Is a big part of that, but so is like I've seen his setup, and in the early years, I think he got it some other way, in the latter part of his career. But in the early years, he was using a wah-wah pedal, always switched on, but kind of half cocked, so that the tone was flattened a bit, you know.
Yeah.
But it was like, he was a genius. But obviously Hendrix kicked all that off.
Yeah. But coming back to you, right? Talking about you, you've released a lot of music in the last little while, right? Like you've released All My Days, you've released Naturally Nocturnal, and a load of singles, right? You've been very prolific in the last 2 to 3 years. At least certainly by my standards anyway. I haven't released anything in a long while. But where do you find the time, like, to be in 3 bands, to record these albums, record these singles, and release them?
Yeah, I get I occasionally get purple patches, you know, where like I suppose like 25% of what I write is acceptable, you know, and the other 75% you listen back and you're going to go, what was I thinking, you know? But they're not released. You take some ideas from them, like from the All My Days thing. Like I recorded, I wrote and recorded, I think it was 26 or 27 songs, of which 11 made the cut, you know. So like the others just weren't up to it. So I'm a firm believer in you know, when you hit a purple patch, stay on the wave as long as you can, you know, as long as it lasts. So, you know, there's things like Cash Machine, which is a quirky little song, and I really love it. But
it's cool.
That song came, like, that was fully formed, written, recorded, and mixed in under 2 hours. You know, so.
I've got a little cash machine. It treats me right when life is eating me. It speeds me up when I am slow. And I know it'll never let me go. It never lets me run and hide.
So it just came fully formed. You know, it's one of those things. It was basically at a time where I just wasn't at it. Like you know, like no matter what I did, like I'd come up to the studio every evening, but I couldn't write anything decent. You know, so I've just looked through the bank of synths that I have, and there's one called Cash Machine, and I really liked it. You know, so you know, I messed around with that, and then that song came along. You know, and like I was nervous about that song. We played in the Big Top, you know, the Milk Market. We launched the album there, and that was like it was sold out, but it was like socially distanced, so there was, I think it was 550 people. But it was I was nervous about that song because it's basically Ian, the drummer, has this SB, he calls them the spuds. It's a Roland pad. So we load in the synth files or any strings that we've used onto that, and he triggers them.
Right.
So basically, that's all synth. There's a bit of guitar in it, and bass, obviously, and drums, but it's really driven with a synth. So if that went wrong, or if any of us came in at the wrong time, particularly me, because I'm kicking it off with vocals, we're sunk, you know, because that is not on a loop. That's the entire track. But it was really well received. You know, there was a really good reaction to that song. So we're keeping it in the set. Very
good. And I suppose maybe a bit more practice to kind of calm the nerves a little bit on that one. Is that it?
Yeah. But I mean, I get nervous. Like I've been playing a long time, and I've played so many places, but I always get nervous before a gig.
Yeah.
Even if it's a covers gig, you know, I occasionally sit in with a band called Mrs. Henry. Um, their normal guitar player is Dave Keary, who plays with Van Morrison. So
Yeah.
when he's not around, I know the lads sort of give me a call. But even though that's relaxed and you're playing with friends, I'm still nervous before a gig. You know, and I think that's healthy though. You know, you have to exude a certain amount of confidence when you're playing.
100%.
But you don't. That confidence isn't necessarily genuine. You know, there's a few nerves, but it's normally gone in the first few songs. I'm terribly nervous before a flag lifters gig because we don't do an awful lot of gigs. You know, we do maybe 4 a year maximum.
Right. Yeah.
And you know, when we do, like, we do a couple of rehearsals beforehand. But there's some of those songs, like Eamon Hatter is such a brilliant songwriter. Like, I've learned a lot from him. But he, like, there's a lot of kind of odd structures and odd chord voicings that he uses. So you have to be on your game.
Yeah.
You know, so it is kind of nerve wracking. But just going back to you saying, you know, I've been prolific over the last few years, I've been incredibly lazy as well because you know, I've always been in bands where somebody else had a studio. So,
Right.
you know, if I had written something, I would say to Eamon or I'd say to Ross, you know, any chance when you got a bit of time, will we put this song down? So it was only when lockdown happened and that wasn't going to be possible that I decided to set up my own studio. You know, so I just got a copy of Cubase Elements. I'm on Cubase Pro now, but Cubase Elements is fine. It's great. It's like
Did the
2
job,
albums
like.
recorded on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why it's been prolific over the last couple of years. There's ideas that I've had for a long time that I've put down. But all of the songs really on the first 2 albums are brand new. You know, there's nothing old there. There will be an older song on the third, well, on the actual Rocket Surgeons album. But it's about the pandemic. It was about something else, but I've changed it.
Right.
It's like the virus creeping around the neighborhood, breaking into houses. You know,
Right.
yeah,
Okay, cool.
yeah, it's kind of
Nice
a
concept
film
record.
noir kind of thing. You know.
Yeah. That sounds cool. That sounds very cool. In terms of your recording, like you mentioned that you've been a little bit lazy until you kind of, I suppose, put your home studio together. Can you tell me a little bit about your home studio? Like, and because you've already spoken a little bit as well about how, you know, you recorded everything on the 2 albums, right? So you did the guitars, bass, vocals, etc., right? And the drums. So did you like go off and just decide, you know what, I'm doing this, right? I'm going to learn how to approach drums, like from a drummer's perspective. I'm going to relearn the 4 strings as opposed to the 6. I'm going to come in and I'm going to like work on my production elements here. Like obviously you'd worked on in studios before, so you knew like the structure of it and how it works,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like you do it segment by segment, right? It's not what most people imagine. I would say, you know, it's not like go into the studio, you know, someone puts down a beat on a track and you sing along to the whole thing, and then you go, "Where's my check?" Right? It's not,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's not that glamorous. So, do you have like a V kit where you kind of like relearned the drums or learned the drums?
No, I've like anything kind of that's odd that I can't program. It's just tapped in on the MIDI keyboard.
Okay.
So I use Easy Drummer. So like I don't see any reason at the moment to move into Superior Drummer because there's loads of expansion packs that I bought. You know, it was basically unpaid by the month, so I was every month I was paid. You know, during lockdown, I was buying more stuff for the
Yeah.
studio. So with drums, it's interesting because you know you can get like I'm a firm believer in trying to keep myself out of my comfort zone. You know,
Yeah.
that no, with the new album vocal, like the one thing I have been neglecting is my vocal is always kind of used the kind of baritone thing or tried to stay safely within my range, which is quite limited.
I will
but
say that that's not quite true. From listening to your record, on what's them saying? Yes, it's a liar's world.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
You
Yeah.
have, I'm going to say, this is a great vocal performance, right?
Oh, thank you very much.
Because you can hear you go outside of your comfort zone, right? You can hear you kind of get into like higher ranges that you don't normally on other tracks.
Yeah, yeah.
And that really kicks off the song. Right.
Yeah.
So when I heard that, I was like, oh, I'm paying more attention now. So
Yeah.
I would encourage you to explore that myself.
No, cheers. I'm definitely doing that. Like, and the lads, like that's the advantage of recording with a band as well. I mean, we're not recording together. Obviously, it's sending each other files, but
yeah,
the beauty of recording with them is that there's a song. It's kind of a punk song, really, called "Another You," and I was singing it in that neutral kind of, the neutral zone, as I'll call it, in my vocal range.
Mm-hmm.
And Ian said, no, you've got to scream that. Like that, you've got to be you've got to shout that song.
Yeah. So
I have, so that'll be, there'll be a few things. Like, I definitely want to play around with my vocal because, certainly, like I was discovering stuff that when I'm laying down harmonies, there's some falsetto that's got in there. There's like this song, the last single, well, the only single from the Rocket Surgeons is "Don't Let the Wrong One In."
Yes.
And all that backing vocal and falsetto is me, So I'm kind of thinking, why am I not using that out front? And it's something that I'm not comfortable with, but I'm going to have to get myself comfortable with.
Yeah.
I mean, and
it's that idea of like keeping yourself out of your comfort zone, right?
Yeah.
Like the same as yourself. Like, I've never rated my falsetto, right? I've never considered myself to have a strong falsetto. I've always found that it breaks, right? But it's a muscle, right?
Yeah.
The more that you work on it, the more that you practice with it, the stronger it'll become, right? And I've even found that any time that I do, vocals on my own tracks, and I kind of want to have this higher vocal that's kind of like further down the mix, that kind of makes it sound this little bit more ethereal. That's what I go to. I go to that falsetto, and every time that I have, it's gone from strength to strength. It's gotten better and better every time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's like, it's a weird thing, because like, certainly vocally, we had a cover band that was kind of fairly well respected, generally because it was called Tumbledown, and we actually did an EP, of original music, which I'm quite proud of as well. But the thing with Tumbledown is that we only picked the songs that we liked. It wasn't your normal cover band where you're going to play Galway Girl or any of that stuff that wouldn't really, none of us would enjoy playing. So we do stuff like Enjoy the Silence, and we even did we did stuff like I'm Afraid of Americans by Bowie, and
brilliant.
And like, again, with Ian triggering off some pads, we ended up doing Tomorrow Never Knows by the Beatles, which I'd say very few bands have attempted, because it's only two chords, but it's all those samples and all that weird carry on. We did our own version of I Feel Love by Donna Summer as well, which just brought the house down.
Lovely.
So you learn stuff from that, but in that band, there was a lot of, like, I was out front. My daddy's taken me out of my comfort zone, because even though I do sing a few of the songs at the Flag Listeners, I'm pretty much a guitar player for that band. But being up front, like, there was I was screaming some of the songs. But what I did realize is that if I had, if I was doing four days in a row where I had gigs with different bands, if that was the first one, if the first one was Tumbledon, my voice was cracked by the third one.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a muscle. You're dead right. Like, I have no idea how Dave Grohl sings like that constantly.
Not a clue.
Because he's ripping his throat asunder.
A lot of honey and lemon, I'd imagine.
I'd imagine so, yeah.
But I did remember, I suppose, seeing a number of years ago, back when I was in a metal band. I was in a band in Limerick, and we'll talk about Limerick, I suppose, in a few minutes.
Yeah.
But, I was in a band called Full Shred, and we used to play in Baker Place the whole time. And
that was a brilliant scene, wasn't it?
It was such a great venue. Great community around there. Like, every week, you'd see people, ramming the place out, regardless of who was playing. It was fantastic to have that. But I used to have like this low growl, right, to my voice that I could kind of, summon whenever I wanted, effectively, right?
Yeah.
The older I've gotten, the more I'm kind of like, did I do damage to myself? When I was 19, 20, 21, right, doing this aggressive growling, metal vocal that, sure, I was able to pull off, but I was only really pulling it off because some of the moves you throw down as a metal vocalist and the front man is like you do a bit of headbanging, right? And when you do that, you bring your diaphragm up, right? And it's much easier to be able to hit those kinds of growls,
yeah,
right? And do those bits and pieces. But now I'm kind of like, was that time well spent, or should I have been doing something else, right? Because I didn't necessarily go home and do the honey and lemon bit myself, So
well, maybe it would be. I think, like, I've definitely done damage to my vocals, but I think you bend towards where you are vocally. You know what I mean? So, I mean, if you have done that damage, I'd say to you, embrace it. I mean, like, your voice speaking wise sounds fine to me. Like, I mean, it's not as if you're going to be the new Tom Waits, and I love Tom Waits, but and I'm kind of glad that his voice got wrecked because I really like that stuff, I mean, if you listen to The Heart of Saturday Night and then you listen to, Get Behind the Mule, that's two different people, But
absolutely it is.
That's just the nature of it. Like, physically, are we up to the, like, our bodies aren't always up to the challenge that we want to give them. Like for instance, I shattered my right wrist in a really stupid accident a good few years ago, and now, like, finger picking is a real struggle for me, because my thumb lock. Your thumb when you're finger picking, for me anyway, your thumb commands the other fingers what they're doing.
For me, it's your baseline, right? It drives everything else, right?
Yeah. But with the way mine is, the only finger that's free is my index finger.
Really?
Lock up. So I'm basically a two finger picker now because of that accident. But no, like, getting back to that, the metal scene in Limerick, even now is fine. It's brilliant. And I love the fact that they're so passionate. I mean, the Siege of Limerick is just, Dolan's is rammed every time for that.
Yeah.
And there's such a loyal support, and as you said, a community. Like, I was never part of that because I don't play metal, but I appreciate it. I really do.
Yeah.
So you were lucky to be part of that scene. I was kind of jealous of that scene for a while. I'd love to have that same camaraderie in the indie scene.
I was very, very fortunate, absolutely. Because I got to play with wonderful bands. I got to play with Sciatica, right? Play on the same stage as them. Yeah, there was like Roper back in the day, and like not to everyone's taste, but the Swarm, were as well. And
that was Mick Carey, was
it? Yes, it was. Yeah.
He's a friend of mine. He's a lovely guy.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. I heard stories about the Swarm's drummer before, about him being asked to join Cradle of Filth,
Well,
years and years ago, right?
yeah,
And him being regarded as the best drummer in Limerick in some circles as well. But yes, I got to spend a lot of time in that community and play gigs in that community, and we actually played the very first Siege. Actually, now that you mention it, yeah, yeah. So it's nice to kind of like look back at that kind of thing and look at the people that were there on the day. We were like the third band up, but we were the first band to get people moshing and stuff. So it was brilliant to kind of have that experience as well. I'm glad to see that the Siege is still going, and Bad Reputation have gone from strength to strength as well. The promoters there,
yeah. I mean, Paul John and Kieran Culhan, and they're just brilliant.
I love that Tall John is still Tall John.
Yeah.
But yes, they're lovely guys, and like, yeah, just playing gigs for them has been, I'll always look back at that time very, very fondly, because I was in a few bands. I was in a cover band called Curious Notion as well, around that time as well, and we weren't as good, is what I'll say. But played a few pub gigs around Limerick, and it was good times. But then, of course,
you're playing now. Are you still playing? Or are you still gigging?
I still play. I don't gig at the minute. I haven't gigged since the start of the pandemic. I was kind of getting back into it when everything kind of kicked off. But I also have a 7-month-old now, so that's taking up a lot of my time.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'd love to get back to it at some stage. But the thing is, when I kind of got back to it pre-pandemic, I was playing on my own, right? So no band, just me and the acoustic guitar, because that's the kind of style of music that I make, right? And in fact, it's the kind of style of music that I used to make before I even joined the metal band. And I used to play in Nesters every now and again.
Yeah.
In Limerick, like playing support slots, just me and my guitar. But it's very lonely, is what I'll say.
It is.
You've done it yourself, have you?
I did it for a while, yeah.
Yeah, like I find that playing in a band, you always have someone to kind of turn to at the end of a show. Like if something has gone wrong, and you can go, "Well, lads, that didn't go 100%, did it?" Right? But and you'll have a bit of crack out of it, and knock some fun out of it or whatever, right? But when it's yourself up there, it's awful lonely when things start going wrong.
Yeah, it is. But it is for a frontman anyway. Like
Can be, yeah.
It's like if you mess up, you're what the crowd looks at.
Yeah.
Not, I don't mean like throughout the gig, but if there's a mistake, that's where they'll look directly at you.
True.
Unless it's a glaring mistake in the drums or something. But I found that I use fairly, like I really like a good dotted delay. So if you're going to make a mistake, don't make it while you've got that engaged, because that mistake is then repeated.
yeah.
So many times.
If you didn't catch it the first time, you might the second.
Yeah. But it's I get you. It is a lonely thing, playing acoustic. But it sounds to me like you've, while you have your hands full now, it sounds like you've really, really still got the passion to keep doing it. So that's brilliant to hear.
Oh, 100%. I mean, like, I have a few songs in the that need a bit of polish, but they're in the pipeline to kind of get finished up and to get done and get pushed out. Maybe get another EP out and then start gigging again to promote that a little bit. But that's a little ways down the line, to be honest with you. But I wanted to ask you as well about two things, I suppose. Your mixing, right? Your mixing is so good, right?
Well, thank you very much.
Like everything that you've produced that I've listened to has been mixed wonderfully, in the sense that nothing overpowers anything else, right? But your vocal is standout, right? Still stands out above everything else, which is great, right? Because a bit of criticism that I've gotten in the past is I keep my vocal too low in the mix, right? So people can't quite hear what I'm saying and that kind of thing, right? Which it's a me thing, right? I don't necessarily want my voice to be particularly loud, but that's something that I'll need to get over. But how did you, I suppose, learn to mix, right? How did you learn to kind of get that interplay between the instruments just right in your mix?
Well, I think like with mixing, you're constantly learning. But at the beginning, I was recording way too loud, and I still record a bit louder than I suppose what you're supposed to do. But there's a wonderful mastering engineer who's worked with everyone from Bowie to Paul McCartney to the Foo Fighters to Christy Moore, and he lives in Limerick, and his name is
Wow.
Richard Dowd. It's WAV Mastering, and he's a really good friend of mine. And he's not paid to give his advice, but I sent him a mix at the start of lockdown because I was just impatient to get something out. And he rang me and he said, "Do you really want to put that out?" And I said, "Why? How bad are you saying it is?" And he said, "It's really bad." He said, everything is just on top of your vocal. You can't hear the guitar. It's a song that's on the first album. It's called Rinse and Repeat. And there's a slide guitar solo at the end that couldn't be made out on that mix. So I just went back to the drawing board, and he just said to me, "Just trust your ears," So I listened to everything in mono before I go to a final mix. So, you like my rule of thumb, and I could be, I'd imagine I'm right in most of this, is that the bass has to be right down the middle, your vocal has to be right down the middle, but you don't have to just have one vocal. So I'd have 3 tracks with the main vocal on it.
Yes.
And I'll put a pre-delay on the reverb on it.
Okay.
So like there's two things that I feel you need to mix. Mixing vocal is really difficult. You don't I wouldn't over process it, because if you have more than 4 plugins on any one track, you've gone far, or you're about to go too far.
100%.
So what I would do is I'd have my strongest vocal down the middle, and then I'll pan 50% left and 50% right with 2 other tracks. Plus you'll have you'll double track your vocal anyway. But the pre-delay, if you put a pre-delay of about 120 milliseconds on each of the vocals that are to the side, that makes it pop slightly out of the mix. Because your reverb isn't kicking in until after your vocal is engaged, so.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So with guitars, I just keep them out of the way. The one plugin that will always be your friend is compression.
100%. Absolutely. Compress everything. That's what I do anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. There's on Cubase, they have a lovely tube compressor plugin. So like with bass guitar, I'll set the attack. Like I'll set a high attack, but a very quick release. So like if you understand compression, you're a good amount of the way there. But like in terms of mixing, it's just trusting your ears. And I think if you listen to it in mono, any glitches would pop out straight away. So if you listen to your whole track, and I think in Cubase, I have Cubase 12 now, but on Cubase 13, I think they have an auto switch to mono, which is really good.
Oh.
But the other thing I do is I'll turn it up really loud, and I'll walk down to the end I'll walk as far away from the room as I can. And if you can hear all the component parts from there, you're pretty much just tweaking after that.
That is a great tip. I think that's a great idea.
So after when you can overmix as well. Like on the song on Fading Light, I almost dumped that song because
really,
I just could, like, first of all, like that's one, like normally I just start one and I finish. I don't kind of keep songs around that are half done for very long, but that one was there for about 2 years. And it didn't have that explosive bit in the middle. So it was really bland. It was linear.
Yeah.
And it was trying different middle eights on it, and it just wasn't working.
Failing life.
From somewhere, that inspiration to just go mad in the middle, just kind of say, look, let's just pop this out into a bit of madness. It's like, a friend of mine described it as, writing a really beautiful ballad and then taking it down a back alley and kicking the shit out of it. It's so it is that saved the song, but in terms of the mixing, I had another guitar track on that, and it was actually a nicer kind of underlying vibe than the one that's on it, but it didn't work. It actually, when I stripped that out, the mix just popped out and popped to life. So I just deleted it. I deleted that track. I'll use that kind of style of guitar playing on something else. But
yeah,
that mixing is like trusting your ears and then trusting your mastering engineer. I really don't, like, unless you're vastly experienced, I'd never master something myself.
Not a hope.
Like mastering is not like it's a particular science, but these days it's not that expensive. It's around 50 quid a track.
Yeah.
So you get it mastered, you get your ISRC number on it if it gets any airplay. Unlikely for the most part, but so it's that will make sense of it'll bring up the levels of everything, but it'll also, when you get the track back from mastering, any tweaks that you have to make are yours generally.
Yeah.
So you'll hear a vocal that's not quite there, or a harmony that you can't really hear properly. And mixing harmonies is really, I've kind of had the pleasure of working with a couple of people who are brilliant engineers, but they've found mixing harmonies to be quite difficult because of the because of the levels you need. I, on the contrary, find it fairly easy to do them, but I break a lot of rules to get it to where I want. If I record one high harmony, I'll just duplicate the track. That automatically picks it up 3 dB. So and you can separate those two then as well. So like not everything I do is right, but if it sounds good to me at the end,
that's kind of it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Sorry, I'm waffling it there.
No, you're grand. You're grand, because, like, if you'll pardon the expression, it's music to my ears. Because I kind of learned to record. Way back when I was in college. A friend of mine was kind of trying to put together a portfolio, right? So he was trying to record everyone and anyone who was around, right? So he recorded a bunch of metal bands around Limerick, but he also recorded, myself, and he put together my first EP, right? A 5-track set of songs. And it was through that experience that I learned how to record and start to mix things down. And then, I'd be sitting beside him, when he kind of showed me what he had done in terms of the mix. And then I'd be like, okay, can we bring this up and bring this down? And he'd sigh, and then he'd go, yes, but it won't sound as good. And I'd be like, just try it anyway. And he'd be like, okay. So he'd try it, and then we'd be like, no, it doesn't sound as good. Can you put it back? So it was that kind of back and forth there. But it was, again, it was that level of experience that you don't get unless you kind of take the time out to jump in and go, you know what, I'm going to put some music down, you know?
Yeah. And I think another great tip is to have a reference track.
Yes.
You know, so whether it's if it's one of your own, or like I'm a huge Bowie fan, so I like for a lot of the second album, I had The Next Day as a reference track. Not to make it sound like that song, but to get those, like, I love the way Tony Visconti, like each part of that song just pops out. You know, it's you know, from Jerry Leonard's kind of honky guitar playing, you know, to the, you know, everything in that song. It's just like that's the way I'd like my stuff to come out as, you know, is that it pops out of the mix.
Yeah.
You know, each component part pops out of the mix a little bit. You know, and look, you're going to have people saying, "Well, what are you recording for?" You know, nobody's going to be listening to it. That's not the point. You know,
exactly.
Like the point is, like, and this is a mistake I think that a lot of the younger songwriters that you know, I've been in contact with a few of them, like, for varying reasons. A few of them will send me a track, and see if I'll put guitar down on it, or I'll do something else on it, which I'm always happy to do. But they're trying to sound like somebody else, so, or they're trying to write to please a certain demographic.
Gotcha.
And I think that you need to write for yourself, because if you like it, there's a good chance other people are going to like it as well.
That's it.
You know, but if you don't like it, or if you're not sure about a song, like, I wouldn't put something out that I wasn't sure of. And like, if you like it, and if you're sure about it, you're not going to be reluctant to play that live. You know, so I think, you know, definitely write for yourself, and then you're mixing. You know, you just, once you get the basics right, like if you have your guitar, your bass, your drums, your vocal, and that's your base level of tracks, and you get them right. Any other bit of color you're adding, it's only padding, you know.
Yeah. I mean, as long as it can stand up on its own 2 feet without that padding, right? You're probably onto a winner as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Speaking of that, right? Of, you know, people saying, you know, the idea of, you know, what are you doing it for, right? You know, why are you bothering to put stuff down? You know, no one's going to listen to it, or it's not going to be heard, or whatever. That kind of is similar to a quote that you had in another interview, right? That, like, if people stop buying cars, no one would build them, right? But people stopped buying music ages ago. But songwriters and musicians have to make music because it's what we do.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, the people in suits have discovered that as well. So
that is true.
So they know they don't have to pay musicians to, you know, or any kind of artist, because you're just going to keep producing stuff because it's what you do, it's what you love.
Do you think that you could ever monetize it, right? Do you think that you could ever do it full time?
Right now, with what I make from original music, no, definitely not. I'd
would
love
you want to?
Yeah. I'd absolutely love to. You know, I couldn't, like, I did play music for a living for a few years, and a great admiration. I don't mean this in any way to denigrate people in cover bands, like, because I was in like, I made my living from cover bands for a while. And in fact, when you play covers, you learn an awful lot about your craft.
You do. And what I will also say is, I've made the most amount of money that I've ever made playing music by playing in cover bands. Right?
Oh,
I'll say that as well.
No, without a doubt. I mean, look, the albums, physical albums, sold fairly well. But I mean, if you, like, for anybody listening to this that are thinking about getting into it, you know, I would say don't expect much. I mean, there's an old quote, you know, if you want to end up with €1 million from the music industry, start with 2 million. You know?
Yeah.
You know, because it's basically, you're not going to be making that money, you know. And I'm older now, and, you know, the likelihood of me being discovered is extremely unlikely. But I don't care much about that. You know, it's it's not like if you're going to get bogged down in that, you're going to start being dishonest in your writing, you know. And I never want that to happen. I think I've been very honest, and you know, I also don't care if people are offended by what I write. I don't think you should be, and I'm not setting out to offend anybody. That's a fact. But you know,
it's just the honesty of yourself, right? That you're putting out there.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. Like, I mean, you know, I'm an atheist, so I'm not going to be singing about God.
Yeah.
You know, and on occasion, you know, there is a sound that I'm working on. That's that kind of gives a bit of a lashing to the Catholic Church, in particular. And you know, and you see it everywhere in the world now. And you see, particularly American politicians talking about, you know, they're ruled by the Bible, and that's just a veil that they pull over their cruelty, because these are people who are actively trying to make poor people poorer so that they can be wealthier. So you know, anyway, that's me off on a tangent.
That's a whole other thing, but yes, yeah.
But you know what I mean. You have to be honest in what you're writing, and I definitely wouldn't set out intentionally to hurt anyone in any avenue of my life, and certainly not in my writing. But I don't mind if it's an unpopular opinion. You know, like if you're going to stay central and say, "Well, I really don't want to offend anybody, but maybe I'll write about something else because this might offend, you know, the somebody's Skype."
You'd never write anything. Never write anything.
No, you wouldn't. You know, and it's that getting back to that, not as advertised. You know,
yeah.
I do. Like, I have a lot of American friends, and some of them inexplicably support Trump. You know, so I knew I was getting rid of them the second I put that out, and as it happened, a lot of them jumped ship certainly from my socials, and I haven't heard from them personally when they heard that. But look, it's you take your craft very seriously, but don't take yourself very seriously. You know what I mean? You know, it's like I'm not going to be sitting in a swimming pool in Beverly Hills on the back of my music. You know, but what I'm going to be is really, you know, what it is going to be for me is really therapeutic.
Yeah.
And you know, you hear, like, I really enjoy your pod, and
oh, thank you.
That was the first kind of first reaction review I'd ever seen of one of my songs, and it's really good to see that, you know. And if that's, like, if it only reached you and you had that reaction to it, then, you know, I'm still chuffed. You know, like, I'm not going to, you know, be pissed off because somebody else is making it. I love it. I love seeing people, particularly Limerick musicians, being successful.
Yeah,
and I've been very complimentary of pretty much all of them, because they, like, that's the thing about Limerick. You know, it's from when I was a kid and before. Like, if you look at the history of it, like, Limerick has always punched well above its weight.
absolutely, it has. 100%.
You know, the shocking thing, like, you know, it's the really tragic thing about Limerick is when they were building the city, they turned their back on the river, you know, and that can't be done now. But at the moment, you know, I mean, if it wasn't for Dolan's, Limerick would be a barren landscape for venues. But, like, we now
mostly,
have more stops than we have proper venues, and that's a sad indictment of certainly of the city council. You know, I think they're absolutely useless.
Yeah, I mean. Yeah. It tends to be on individual citizens to kind of try and take this thing into their own hands, right?
Yeah.
To try and make something work. Like, and even then, when people do try and make something work, everything seems to go against them when they try, right? Like you had, like, years and years ago, like, you had the High Stool, right? And you had, you know, the aforementioned Baker Place, the Wicked Chicken, right? And you had Dolan's, and you had Termites, and more recently you had, like, the Blind Pig down Fox's Bow and stuff like that, and, like, just independent people trying to, like, have gigs, and it's so difficult for them to, like, run a business and get people in the door to see gigs as well, right? It's there's nothing there, right, to incentivize people to do that kind of thing these days, right? Because all those places I've mentioned, they're gone now, right?
They are, yeah.
You know?
It's so sad because, you know, you're dead right. And I had kind of approached the council about, you know, we outside of Dublin, Limerick has the highest rates in the country, and our city is dying, and they're not put one together with the other. I mean, what I suggested was, you know, give rates relief, because like the councillors have no power. They do have the power over rates though, so they could give rates relief to anybody that's supporting the local artistic community, and that then on the flip side means that, you know, you can get artists actively working within the city to promote the city, to get people into the city, you know, like make coming into Limerick City an experience. Right now it's not a very good experience. There's hardly anything open, and it's, you know,
I was down there quite recently, and it was not the city that I remember, to be honest with you, in terms of its vibrancy. You know, like I was walking down Cruises Street at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and there was no one. It was a ghost town. You know.
Yeah, it's really sad to see. You know, I mean, like a lot of venues after lockdown, you know, they're kind of cutting their cloth a bit more closely, and they're not having gigs. But you know, if it wasn't for Dolan's and the Record Room, really, I mean, you have Mother Max put on some of the other events, which is great. You have Charlie Malone's and some events, but really, it's the Record Room and
Dolan's. Yeah, I must get down to the Record Room actually.
That's a lovely room to play in. Really is. Yeah, there's a great vibe down there. There's a real kind of, you know, it's like you're in another time.
Good.
There's a real clubby kind of, you know, and real old venue kind of vibe about it. I really love playing there.
Do you know, is the you know, down by the docks, down past Dolan's, there used to be a self-storage place.
Yeah.
And years ago, they used to, I don't know if they still do, but they used to rent out self-storage units to bands. That if they wanted to go in and like set up their gear, they'd do them a rate that they could leave all their stuff there into the self-storage unit, give them power, all that kind of thing. Do you know if they still do that?
I'm not sure. I don't think so, but I know like the last thing that we did in there was the tribute to Dolores O'Riordan. You know, there was myself and Eamon, and we were only just sitting on the couch laughing for that video. But I know they did that in there, but I wasn't aware of doing that. That's a really good idea. I hope they are. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, there was a guy that was he Indie Limerick? Is that what he was called? Keith was his name.
Keith Kelly.
Keith Kelly. He used to work in there, and he kind of pushed that to kind of get that going. So I hope that that's still going. But lovely lad as well.
Oh, he's son as well. Yeah, he's lovely. Like this, I think most of the musicians and Limerick musicians most of the musicians, in fact, have been okay. A couple of them are up their own arses, obviously.
Yeah.
You know, that's par for the course. You know, I'm sure I am in ways as well. You know,
I mean, that's what happens, right? There has to be an element of ego as well, somewhat, right, when it comes to playing music, right, and getting it in front of people. It's just some people are able to control it a bit more than others, I think.
Yeah, and I think like I played for a long time with Joe Brown. He's a Limerick legend, you know, and he passed away not too long ago. But he taught me an awful lot, you know, that like he had such a stage presence. I mean, that guy, you know, if it was different circumstances, because it was proper country as well, you know, it wasn't country, it was like real rootsy kind of Americana more than country, really.
Yeah.
Like he would have been as big as Johnny Cash. Like the guy he had movie star good looks, you know, and had this stage presence about him. And then you had like Tuesday Blue was his backing band for a while, you know, which was the hottest band in the country at the time, you know, with a Limerick band. So that for a while they called it Tuesday Brown, you know, when they were backing him. But
yeah,
I got to play with him for a number of years, and he like that's the other bit of advice. Don't kind of marginalize the old fellas, because they've been there and done it, and they definitely know more than you do. You know, maybe not about what's current, excuse me, or anything like that, but certainly about stagecraft, you know.
Yeah, it is a craft, right? Like trying to get people on side, like from the get go, is
Absolutely, yeah.
such a challenge sometimes. But you just kind of have to keep, I suppose similar enough to talking about the vocals, right? You do it enough times and you start to figure out what works and what doesn't, right? You flex that muscle a little bit more, and you learn from it. Like, yeah, playing to the other bands, right? Is like when you play gigs and you're only playing to the other bands, when you kick off, never easy, but
No,
it's also another opportunity for you to try stuff, right, and see if stuff works, right, in a relatively safe environment as well. And when you are, the front man, when you are the singer in the band, and you are learning your stagecraft, that's invaluable as well, you know.
yeah, absolutely. No, when you get the opportunity to play with people who've been there and done it, that's that. If you can't help but learn from that, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And like I've been insanely lucky, because I've got to play with a lot of the people that I really admired. I got to play with Johnny Feen from the Horselips.
Oh yeah.
I gigged with him, and he's such a huge loss as well. But you can't help but be educated by that guy. I mean, that guy, you know, played all over the world to tens of thousands of people at a time.
And he had such an interesting style of playing. It was very, very lazy is the wrong word, but I think casual, a very casual style of playing that he made it look effortless.
He did. He was technically so gifted, though. I mean,
yes,
I just, and it did look effortless to him, but he absolutely adored it. He like when I played with him, he was so encouraging and complimentary, but he'd also have this thing: don't play at the start of this, John. This is just me. I'm just going to kick this in. I'll give you the
right.
Nice. I want you to play slide guitar on this. I don't want you to play anything else on this. Just the slide.
Okay.
So he'd direct you with very quick directions, very polite, but very kind of, it's my way or the highway kind of thing.
Yeah.
Without actually staging it. Like, he's such a lovely guy, a real gentleman. I miss him.
And I know we're kind of over, I suppose, an hour a little bit here, but it's been a lovely chat. But do you mind if I ask you, when do you think the third record might come along?
It was supposed to be out already, but there's been a few delays that just were unavoidable. So I released my first when I released all my days, I released it on the 4th of December, which was a really bad idea because you've got Christmas traffic in terms of getting CDs or even like getting anything done coming up to Christmas is a challenge. So I would say it'll be early February next year, but hopefully.
Lovely.
But I mean, use the time that we would have been using to promote it to actually finish it. And like, I'm not mixing this one, which is well, my input is still there.
Yeah.
But I've just enjoyed the idea of handing over the reins completely to a guy called Barry Heaney, who's the other guitar player in the band. So everything, like the drummer Ian McNamara will be playing drums on this. There's live drums on it. So it's a bigger undertaking as well. But it's good, and it's a lot more lively than the other two. And I think it kind of needed to be, because that's another thing. I can settle well into that kind of mid-tempo range.
Sure.
But it's not very exciting if that's all you're listening to.
I mean, I will say that they're both very good records, right?
Very much.
The two of them. And I would actually say that no, I don't think it's fair to say I have a preference for one of the over the other, but they're both very different albums, right? Is what I'll say, right? And I will say that there is probably more in terms of I suppose the upbeat stuff maybe on All My Days rather than Naturally Nocturnal, right? Or like slightly higher tempo stuff at least. Because I think Naturally Nocturnal like lives up to its name, right? And I think that it is like the ideal record to listen to, like if you're going out for like a midnight jaunt, right?
Yeah.
Like stick some earphones in, go out for a walk at nighttime, just take everything in. And I think that like particularly the bass line on Motorways are full of broken hearts, right? That
Yeah.
is a wonderful bass line that really kind of
Thanks very much.
I think it really kind of it vibes well with walking around in the dark, I think.
There's no surprises here. You've been on this road every day. But some of our fears snaking endless carriageways.
You know,
Yeah. I didn't think of it that way, but I will. I must re-listen to it actually and see, maybe go for a walk. But yeah, Naturally Nocturnal is more of an introspective album. You know, obviously, like when you get a bit older, you know, your experiences have shaped you, but you've, like, even when they're negative, you know, you kind of take something from them, and it's kind of a way of burying some stuff, you know. I mean, like there's the last song on that album, and curiously actually, and it's just occurred to me, like, I've ended both albums with songs about people I've lost. And The Night Sky is about a friend of mine called Stuart Byrne, who died young. And it's basically, you know, obviously my feelings about him, but the second verse is a drunken conversation we had in Cork on the way back to a house party.
Right.
And, you know, it's stuff like that that I think you do need to pay tribute to people you've lost. And certainly, you know, I think it's a wonderful thing to have a song written about somebody, you know, and it also focuses you on what you're going to write. But, you know, in terms of Naturally Nocturnal overall, it was very introspective. You know, like, you know, Everyone Breaks is, you know, like I was in an addiction center
Right.
a long time ago, back in the 90s. So it's a long time ago. But I had just got there had been some stuff that happened in my life that like broke me, you know, that broke me, and I just like I lost two people very, very close to me in very close succession, and I didn't handle it well, you know. So
Yeah.
I'm grand now, you know. That's like, but I know that there's a lot of focus on mental health now, and rightly so. But when you're writing, that's where the best stuff comes from. You know,
Yeah, it is.
you know, it's where you've kind of dragged along the gravel a little bit.
I agree. I think that you're spot on, and even listening to Everyone Breaks, it even kind of like resonated very well with me, because I had my own kind of mental health issues when I was 27. I had my own kind of like burnout and breakdown, right? Thought that I'd wasted my whole life, all this kind of stuff, right? At the age of 27, like horrible kind of feelings, right? But that did then kind of go on. Well, that combined with, you know, the loss of some other people in my own life as well, you know, led to the creation of a song called Tears on the Floor, which I've never monetized, right? Well, sorry, that's a lie. I have monetized, but I've never profited from it, right? So I've taken all of the funding, and any cent that I make from that, it goes to like Pieta House and mental health charities.
Oh, nice.
From that, right? So, you know, it's funny how it's not very funny, I suppose, right? Talking about breakdowns, right? But you know, it's interesting how those kinds of things, they do sometimes form the best work. And as you say, it kind of comes from this idea of introspecting and looking at yourself and, you know, your life in general, and going like, okay, let's let's therapize a little bit here and get it out
Yeah.
onto a track, you know.
Yeah, I mean, there's that song, that there's a line in that song, you know, I painted a picture and I filled it up with noise.
Yes.
That that is that's basically me just lying to everybody while I was trying to hide the fact that I was killing myself with substances, you know. So but I went away and got it sorted. You know, it's something you can't deal with alone, but you ultimately do deal with alone, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You need to get help, but you need to understand it as well. So I'm in a good place now. But it's good to never forget that kind of stuff, you know. And they're like what's the name of the song? I was that soldier.
Oh, I was that soldier. Yeah.
Is the new version of that guy, because I just thought about, you know, like I was suicidal back then, and if I was walking to the bridge to do away with myself back then, now I know that if there's somebody walking towards the bridge to do away with themselves, they're walking past a load of people that they could, if they just reached out to, these people have gotten worse.
Yeah.
And could probably just give you the one line of just one sentence that's going to make sense for you, you know. So, you know, it's just about, you know, hoping that people would just reach out and say, look, I'm stuck here. Do you know a way out?
Sometimes you leave it behind you. Sometimes it's all that you can see. Don't let it be all that defines you. Let it be what binds you to. I caught you every time you thought you'd have enough. 'Cause I was that soldier.
Other than the way out I'm considering, you know. Like the suicidal mind, I will say this to you, and it's the one thing that still, if I think about it too much, it still keeps me awake at night, is that when I made that decision, it seemed completely irrational.
Yeah.
It just seemed that that was the most peaceful part of my life, that here's the decision, I've just got to go and do it now. Now, thankfully, I didn't do it, and I had good people around me, a good family, and, you know, I got through it. And you will obviously still suffer the stigma because it's out there. Like, a lot of people knew about it. So, you know, a lot of people still look at me as if I'm a bit of a telpus, you know, but I'm not. I've got a good life, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm loving what I'm doing recording. So, you know, I'll keep doing that as long as I can physically do it.
That's brilliant. You know, music is it's a great medicine, you know.
Oh, it's unbelievable therapy, yeah.
Coming back, I suppose, to talking about the third album real quick. You know, it coming out in February ideally, but we won't, I suppose, stick a nail
Well,
on
it's been
that.
delayed
Put a pin
so
on it.
that, you know, and it's through nobody's fault. You know, it's all different stuff has happened. But I suppose there's 4 people involved now rather than just one, you know. So you've got to kind of take everything else into account as well.
Yeah. If you send it on to me when it's out, I'll give it another listen. I'll give it a full listen and a full review of the whole album if you'd like.
Oh, yeah, I'll definitely do that. Yeah.
Some final thoughts about individual songs that I kind of had here, as well as kind of a little bit of fodder, I suppose, for chat. Your solo on Rinse and Repeat is unbelievable. It's a top tier solo. We've already talked about your vocal on Liar's World. It's really great. Cash Machine has lovely interplay between the guitar and bass. The way that they kind of play off one another is fantastic. I also have a note here about The Night Sky, about it being a very, very pleasant song, and it's nearly a much more pleasant version of We Don't Need Nobody Else by Whipping Boy.
That's high praise. I'm a big fan of Whipping Boy.
Yeah. So, like, I suppose obviously the spoken vocal on that a little bit as well is but I suppose the lyrical content then as well is obviously much nicer. I suppose it's speaking with a fondness, right, as opposed to I suppose a nastiness that Whipping Boy had on their track.
Yeah, the nastiness was good for with them. I mean, I know that guy went through a hell of a lot.
Mm.
And
And
I really love that Heartworm album.
It's a great record, unbelievable record. My final note that I made here about Ghosts, it is such a sinister sounding song.
Yeah,
as well.
yeah,
it is great. I love it.
yeah. So yeah, I love those ones that build.
Yeah.
I'd probably overdo it a little bit, but yeah, I love Ghosts. There's another song that's like is a play on words. It's similar to it's not similar as in it sounds exactly like it. It's a similar vibe to Ghosts, and it's called "Your Heart Is a Notion." Not, but if you if you hear it sung, it sounds like your heart is an ocean.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a play on words, but it's kind of about those kind of Suella Braverman types that people who claim to be in service of you are actually trying to kill you.
Entirely performative, like in terms of what they're trying to say. Look, is that one that you've done, or is
no? That's going to be on the third album. I might actually send you on the demo of it. If you'll have a listen.
I'd love to.
This isn't mixed, but I'll email it on to you.
Yeah. I'd love to hear it. But John, thank you very much. That's everything that I kind of wanted to talk about. But we've covered off so much stuff over the course of this chat.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
It's been a lovely chat, and thank you very much for your time. I very much appreciate that, and for releasing such wonderful music as well. I very much appreciate.
Oh, that's very kind of you
doing that. And long may it last, John.
Hopefully, yeah.
Is there anything you want to plug before we kind of wrap up here?
No, it's just the usual. My current single is Failing Light. I'm really proud of it. It's done bits all right. There's been like Alan Jakes on Green and live on 95 FM is just such a support. And he's played it a few times. He's been a brilliant supporter of mine. And it's a great show. It really is a great show. So it's got a bit of airplay there and elsewhere. So yeah, it's doing okay, but it's a good song.
It is a good song. It's a very good song. You are a great sport, John. Thanks very much for coming on and for talking to me about all of your music. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and I hope I'm not keeping you from your 7 months old as well.
Not at all.